You are listening to the Thinking Effect podcast with Orshel Green and Lillian Kriegler.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 33 of the Thinking Effect podcast. And this is a very special episode as we have a very inspiring teacher as a guest today. Hello, Tanya, how are you?
Oh, very good. I just had to look down. Oh, did she just call me inspiring?
Of course you are.
Very good.
Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name's Tanya Moran, and I'm currently working in a school as a professional learning coordinator, so secondary school. I teach year 8 and 9s, humanities and STEAM and digital technologies. So my background is actually primary and early childhood in Reggio, Emilia approaches. And I've been in and out of education over the last, let's just go with 20 years.
We don't want to expose any age here. No.
No, that's right. I'm 38.
You look fabulous. So lots of experience in education, and I love it when teachers switch between primary to secondary because it's very different setup and different ways of teaching. Tanya, I know you're a very different teacher. You have a very different thinking. So can you share with us what motivated you to teach differently, to go a bit differently about teaching within a school setup?
Well, I wasn't a very good student growing up. I was never engaged. I didn't like it. My parents actually owned a pizza shop, and I worked a lot with my dad. My dad didn't mind me skipping school and working in the pizza shop, and these days you can't get away with that. But I guess through that, it was more hands-on and learning how to live. So, you know, serving the customers, doing the accounting, doing the ordering, working with different people. So for me, when I went to school and it was, you know, scenarios that just didn't mean anything to me because I couldn't relate it to my world, I just used to switch off. So I was, I guess, educated by my parents, to be honest. And so when I left school, I actually went into store management for McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
So I'd been working there as a crew, and then I just wanted to do that for a bit. And in, I think, my early 20s, I decided I wanted to actually go and do something with education and have an impact, I guess, for it, because I enjoyed working with, you know, young sort of adults and teenagers and even adults, older adults that I was working with. And I really liked the professional learning and the thinking and, you know, the relationship building. So I thought I'd be a good teacher.
Yeah.
And when I jumped into teaching, it was in Victoria when I first started. So it was about 17 years ago. And I actually spoke with him a few months back. I started teaching, and there was an Are You Mad foundation, and Adrian Bertolini was doing a lot of work in this space in terms of, you know, thinking about what you can do with your community and impact. So I was working at a school in Dandenong, and we had very high sort of multicultural sort of makeup in the classroom, and most of the students had been here for probably 6 months to 12 months before they reached my classroom. So there was, you know, language barrier, there was culture barrier, and the way that most teachers were operating in classrooms just wasn't working in my classroom, especially because of the language and the culture barrier. So I got involved with the Are You Mad? And from that, it was like the thinking, and through that, we then started work with Kath Murdoch, and her work has actually influenced sort of how I teach and why I teach, and I guess a little bit of my background there as well. So it's about making it relevant to the kids and not being so boring.
I'm into that. So, so can you share with us a bit more about how do you approach it differently? How do you make it relevant and interesting and engaging for your students?
Yeah. Well, look, you know, there are some things that as educators you actually need to follow. So, for example, you might have the Victorian curriculum, but you know, it's not a Bible, so you can make just about anything work. It's the way that you interpret it, and it's the way that you apply it. So long as you meet sort of the expectations, the mandated expectations, you can actually, if you've got the creative and the courage sort of self-sense about you, and you want to make it enjoyable, not only for your kids, but for yourself as well, to walk into the classroom and get curious, you can actually play with the Victorian curriculum in that sense.
Can you share a concrete example how you take, for example, a topic from the curriculum and how you tailor it in a way or facilitate it in a way that is, engaging and interesting for your students?
So, okay, so a recent example, so the Year 9 digital technologies curriculum, for example, I don't go in teaching the tools per se. So for the last Year 9 digital technology unit that we looked at, the inquiry question was, should our school go paperless? So we start with sort of an inquiry question. And then as we're unpacking the inquiry questions, I'm introducing them to, industry standard tools, but I'm not focused on, I guess, learning how to use a computer. You're taught, what to press, what not to press. I'm not actually doing that. I'm demonstrating. Okay, we're going to look at some research about ink versus paper, for example, and have a look at, what are the pros and cons, and how does this relate to our inquiry question? And then from our research, we're going to make a video based on our understanding of what we just researched. So in that process, I'll teach them 3 different tools, 3 different industry standards, and then they can select, from the easy, medium, or hard one. So they might have like an easy sort of, Adobe Spark, or they might have a harder one, Adobe Premiere Pro, or they might have an in-between where they can use like a pivot animator to create a movie just using free software. So in that process, it's about making the connections to the real world. And then, for example, in this unit, part of the unit, they had to actually come up with a design. So I was teaching them about networks. So I introduced them to all of the networks that are out there. And then I showed them how to use Visio. And they had to come up with a design using Visio on their solution for the school. So if they had a hybrid solution, they would have to design that and put that. So along the way, they were contained a blog. So they had to put that up and then actually talk about their design, and then have a look at the school policies, and then talk about, because this is where security comes in then, right? So it's all related back to ICT, but we're not actually talking about ICT. We're actually talking about the real world. So they're looking at the school policies. Okay, well, in my design, what needs to change? What doesn't have to change? And they've got to talk about that in their blog. So it's the way you design it. You just got to get creative with how you design it, and take the focus on, the hows, and go more with the whys. Why are we doing this? And what use? And by the end of that digital technology course, I had students that knew how to create a blog using different platforms, knew about free websites, knew how to create an actual website, knew how to create videos and Visio. So they're using all of those tools that I suggested in the Victorian curriculum as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what is the impact of taking this approach to teaching on your students and the broader community? I mean, what do you see as a result of that?
It gets them thinking. It really does get them thinking. Thinking about. So, for example, the last reflection for that unit was they had to reflect back on, their solution and the work that they had done. And I keep it simple. What worked well, even better if. Now, if you go back to those reflections, you can see that none of my kids talk about what worked well in a sense of, this program worked well or that didn't work. They actually talk about, what worked well is my understanding of, ink versus paper. Now I understand, not to print so much because it's the ink, because it has the effect on the environment. So they're thinking more about their world, their impact themselves, and what they can do going forward. So it's just getting them to think a little bit more about what they do and why they do it and how they can do it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that, the curriculum is not a Bible and you kind of can make it your own. Can you tell us how the system within the school that you're working with, how is the response to you doing things differently and kind of pushing the boundaries of the system?
So I've worked in a few different schools. I've also coached in different schools as well. It's a bit of a mixed reaction. You've got a lot of teachers that just won't push the boundaries and are literal. We need to do it that. So it's more actually understanding their perspective and having that conversation. So having it as a way of opening up the dialogues. Things like, for example, schools setting policies. And when you ask the why question, it's because, we're mandated to do, reporting or this. But when you actually unpack it and you start having the conversation with, well, okay, we're not actually mandated to have 3 summative assessments or 4 summative assessments. We're actually just, mandated to do, twice a year sort of online reporting. So how can we actually create that differently? Let's have a look at what we're doing. And let's get a little bit smarter. So it all comes back to opening up the dialogues, having those conversations, but respectfully. You can't come in, with an arrogance, my way is best. There are lots of people that just wouldn't agree with me, and that's okay because that's their values and that's perspective. And, quite frankly, they haven't taken the risk. So they haven't taken the risk to do something differently or try it. And I guess that's probably, more for them to resolve than me to resolve. I'm there for the students and the impact that I can make. So the more conversations I can have with parents and with teachers about designing learning and teaching, I think is more powerful when you come in from a respectful sort of angle.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioning parents. So can you elaborate on that, on what's their part within teaching differently and creating a different learning environment in your classroom?
Yeah, well, you have a lot of parents still because they grew up with the old traditional systems. And let's face it, we still have traditional systems out and about, right? So they only know what they know. So for them, the traditional system worked and they think it worked because they got the job and they got the career and they've been successful, whatever they've been doing up until this point in time. So let's not change it because it worked for me, right?
Yeah.
So those conversations, the more you can engage with parents in terms of, the understanding. Yes, we have got kids that are going to be in workforces that, that don't exist. But hang on, these kids are the ones that are going to be probably designing those jobs in the future. And how are they going to design it if we're not going to teach them, the thinking skills, the collaboration, what can we do if this happens? And so it's more about teaching the students how to be creative, how to be flexible, and how to come up with solutions that aren't in your face.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that for teachers who want to teach differently, they should engage with the parents and their fellow teachers as well, because all of them needs to come along that journey.
Yeah. And you can have workshops, you can have students leading those workshops. You can have a community that designs a professional learning with teachers. It doesn't necessarily have to be, teachers doing this by themselves. And, I know that you're a parent and that you bring a whole lot of experience, and you've written a book around, thinking, and you can bring that to the table. So in having the invitation for parents to join in and design that together with you, so they actually understand what you're trying to achieve, and you get the buy-in. Yeah, so parents and teachers and students working together, it's always been said, it's the way to go. But the more we look at, mandating and workloads and stuff, you think of that as an extra, but you only think of that as an extra because you're piling it on top of everything that you really don't have to be doing anyway.
Yeah,
it's a matter of actually auditing with your community. Well, what is it that we're doing and why are we doing that? And it's just like, you know what, that doesn't really matter. Let's just get rid of it.
Yeah.
And redesign it.
So what would be your advice for a teacher who wants to do things differently and take a different approach, but is concerned about the response from the principal and other, management staff at the school, and what happens also when they encounter some resistance of doing things differently?
You can't be a cowboy, right? You can't just say, I want to do this, and have no plan and have no reason or rhyme. And, you can't just walk into a principal's office or, a deputy principal's office and say, I want to do this, and then not explain the why, and not link it back to the school's strategic plan, because the schools all have strategic plans and visions and priorities. So you need to actually really think about, okay, does this actually align with the school's vision and priorities? And if it doesn't, then am I at the right school, right?
Yeah.
So as a teacher, you need to actually think about that. If you're trying to do something that just doesn't fit the vision or priorities, then you're at the wrong school, right?
Absolutely.
But if you're at a school where the vision and priorities align and you've got an idea, then absolutely because we all come with good intent and goodwill, and every single person in the school has got good intent and goodwill. So if you have an idea and you have a plan and you can tie it back to the strategic plan and priorities and what you're doing as a whole, then people are more inclined to listen and have that conversation with you. It's not a demand, it's a conversation that you need to have initially. And I'm not a one-person band. I never go into any of my workplaces, be it education or industry, thinking I've got all the solutions. I might come in and say, I've got this idea. It ties into our strategic plan and vision, but I'm not sure how to execute it. So, okay, I know that you're great with design thinking process. Right, let's get that external expert in to work with us, to unpack this, to design it with us. So it's about networking and, working with external people. Even parents have got skills and backgrounds that you can utilize to create that plan. So it's bringing that in, and it's not about you. You got to remember, it's not about you. You're there for the children. You're there to change what you're doing. And if you have good intent, then you're thinking about all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, do your homework and come prepare to have an open conversation where you have a strong why, and you can demonstrate how that can be beneficial for the children.
Yeah, and it's got to be about engaging them and seeing them grow as individuals. And if it's not about that, then get out of education.
Why are you there?
That's all I'm going to say. Just get out.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any other, before we wrap it up, do you have any other piece of advice or anything you would like to share with teachers that would help them on the journey? Because I know that it's not easy. It's not easy to kind of push the boundaries, and sometimes teachers might be concerned, or maybe they also feel concerned about expressing their opinion, which is very different to the rest of the school. So do you have any other advice you would like to share with teachers to help them along their journey?
I'm a big believer in always having a coach or a mentor. I have always pretty much had one in whatever industry and education setting I've always been in. So you can have those conversations where someone challenges you or, unpacks your thinking with you. So invest in yourself. And if you can't afford it, get the school to invest in you in terms of getting that support that you need. And also at the moment, the biggest thing on every teacher's mind, and we're exhausted. We're so exhausted. It's not funny, right? And it's, the workload is just incredible. But have a think about and have a look at your workload and look at where the bottlenecks are and actually try and unpack the root cause of that, because you might actually end up finding there's things that you can get rid of and still meet, the mandated inspections or the compliance or whatever it is that your school's out to achieve. You just got to get creative. So if you're in a situation where you are overloaded and workloaded out, just have a look for the root cause and then unpack that and see what's doable and what can be changed. And look, it might be a case of you can't actually do anything about it because it is higher up the chain, but start having those conversations. I think if more people started having those conversations, we've got some very brave principals and deputy principals and even teachers coming out and talking. If you're brave enough to start having those conversations, then things will get changed, but nothing's going to get changed if everyone keeps quiet and just lets the one or two people to go out. Start having those conversations, start having a look at what you're doing and just be a little bit smarter and invest in yourself. Get someone that you can get coach or mentor you.
This is a lovely message to end this episode with. Very powerful. Tanya,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
I don't know if it was powerful.
It is. And I think it's important to know that, yes, if we all, working towards improving our education system and doing things differently and challenging it, then things would change. I mean, we can do it. I mean, teachers have more power than they might think. I think I've said that before. But I truly believe that. And it's a question of having that confidence to speak up, to say what you think, and to work together to find a way to make it happen at your school.
Yeah.
So
thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience and wisdom with everyone, Tanya. I appreciate it.
No worries.